Okay, a lot of people over the years have asked me how I do UVW unwrapping, so I'm going to narrate over this video where I am doing some unwrapping for some furniture. I'm just going to describe the process. It's actually a lot simpler than you might think. There's a couple simple principles that you have to keep in mind. One is you want to do your unwrapping when your polygons are as simple as possible. That makes it a lot easier to select everything, and you'll see in this video that a lot of the hard work is done with just selecting and isolating different areas. So what you want to do is find seams, find naturally occurring seams. In this furniture it's easy because there's some grooves on the arm of the chair that represent where two pieces of wood would come together. So obviously there will be a seam in the material there. They won't line up across those seams. So those are naturally occurring seams. I'm going to select everything between those two seams and unwrap it together so that the wood all matches, the grain all matches in this area that I'm selecting. It can be unwrapped as an individual object, and then the other objects don't have to necessarily line up with it because they wouldn't in real life. So that's one thing you have to consider, is that like with furniture, especially fabric, there will be naturally occurring seams in certain places, and that's where you want to put your seams for your textures as well, for your materials. Okay, so I'm just selecting using basic poly tools. So I selected the middle and then grew out from there, and I picked up some ones I didn't necessarily want in this segment of the unwrap. So I'm just deleting those now. And then I'm going to detach, which is just a tool inside a polygon, and I'm detaching that as its own element. And this just makes it so it's easy to select later. So now I've got, in my element selection mode, I can select these different elements I've created, which is great. I'm going to hide unselected there, or hide selected, sorry, and then that just makes it easier for me to work with what is remaining. I'm just investigating my model and everything looks clean and good at this point. Now I just unhit all so we can see the whole thing, and it's time to put on the UVW Unwrap modifier once we've got our different areas selected that we want. And you can see that it automatically puts seams now at where the elements come together. Those green lines are seams for UVW unwrapping. If I make it so I select the whole element at once, then you can see those elements that I've detached from each other, which is fantastic. And if I lock in that selection, see if I can figure it out here. Yeah, so move that away from the others now, and then select the next element and do the same. All my objects are isolated from each other, and what I just did was hit the quick peel button, which is over there under peel with a little lightning bolt on it, and that just kind of lays out all the objects individually and kind of flattens them. But you can see you can't flatten a tube because then there'll be overlapping UVs. So what I need to do is create another seam on this by selecting an edge. And I want to put it somewhere where it's not going to be noticeable or look distracting. And right underneath of that arm is fine. I can then just do a simple loop command and it selects all of them, and then you hit break to create a seam there. So now you see that purple line going along that seam. That's now broken there, which means those vertices are no longer welded together. So when I peel it, it now flattens out entirely. When those are still connected, it'll just flatten the tube on top of itself, which doesn't really work. But if you cut that seam, now it can flatten out flat, and we now have a nicely unwrapped object. We need to do the same thing with this other element. Select an edge, loop along that edge, like that, and then go to the break tool. And then quick peel it again. Now we've got two unwrapped arms of that chair. What I'm going to do now is put a simple checker material on it so that we can see what that unwrap is looking like. I'm going to change the tiling on that checker, make sure it's visible in viewport, and then apply it to my chair. You can see the two that I've already unwrapped are working quite well. That back piece isn't working well because it is not unwrapped properly yet. Setting the tiling to 20 and 20. Make sure those checkers are showing up basically as squares on your object. Even that front piece looks pretty nice, but it has actually got overlapping faces because it doesn't have that extra seam in there yet. So let's do that now. I'm going to select an edge. And then loop it. Just like normal poly editing. We need another one down here so that everything can unwrap and lay down flatly. So once we've got that selected, hit break or explode, and then select that element and peel it, just like that. Now we've got that wood or that checkerboard wrapping completely around that front leg, which is perfect. Now here we'll have to add 3 seams. I'll show you how we handle this. We have the regular seam here, so let's select that and loop it. Loop this one up here. And then break it and peel it. But you can see at the top it's getting a little squished. That's because we need another seam up there. So I'll figure that out here in a second. Okay, so everything's working except the top. Obviously we need another seam up here. Loop. Okay, and it's going up into that top piece, which we'll have to handle a little bit differently. We can break these to make the seam. Okay, so you can see it's still not unwrapping perfectly at the top. It's still a little squished. Working slightly better. But right there is where it doesn't work. That's because we need some way to flatten out this top part. And what we should really do is just detach it entirely from the rest of the chair. So let's select it. What you can do is go to the planar mapping, which will just split that off as its own object, just like that. Make it go on the X axis alignment. So now it just broke it off into its own element essentially. Scale it down to the same proportion as the rest of it. You can see now it's getting nice mapping up on top, and the benefit is now we don't have anything that's going to be squishing this other leg up. So we can peel it again, quick peel, and now it flattens out, as you can see, and now the checkers are looking quite nice on that whole chair. And the top is its own separate object up there. Everything looks good. Pretty basic, pretty simple. This isn't all the tools that you'll ever need, but with those basic principles and those basic tools, it becomes a lot more a lot less confusing and a lot more simple to do basic UVW unwrapping, in my opinion. With just those basic things, I'm able to do 90% of all UVW unwrapping that I ever need to do. So check those out, learn those basic things. Remember, make nice selections, detach them as elements, and think about where seams should go so that things can lay down flatly. Remember, like on the top of that chair, if you have a big flat spot like that and the seam is going up to that, there's really no way to physically make that without just kind of squishing it into a ball. So that's where you need to think, okay, let's detach this other piece up here, and then the whole thing will be able to lay flat. So that's how you have to think. Think like someone who is sewing fabric together, and think in the sense of fabric patterns and how they go together. So when you're doing a chair, think of it how the fabric pattern was made and where the seams would go in order to make it all flow smoothly and to look nice. That's the same way you should be unwrapping it when you're doing it in 3D Studio Max. So put your seams there and use that quick peel tool, which is super handy, and it will work wonders for you. That's really all you need to know. Think about where your seams should go and then use that quick peel tool. You should be good to go.